Hey,
Hey, hello.
how's it going?
Yeah, very good. It's almost middle of the night in Poland.
Oh, Jesus Christ, that's right.
It's like 6 hours between
Oh,
time zones.
oh my gosh. So yeah, you are like yeah, you're in the dark for real.
Yeah. Okay, so let's start with the new album you recently released. American Standard is a concept album about an eating disorder. It's on the album about your life, basically. So why did you decide to face this very topic?
Well, hold on, I gotta pick my little dog up. It's one of those things like we were kind of at a crossroads as a band for a little bit. Our last record came out at the beginning of the pandemic, and then once things kind of cleared up and people could tour again, our record had already been out for 2 years, and we did a series of like pretty like not bad tours, but like tours that we didn't feel good about. Um, and you know, Ben got busy with his job and he had some health issues. Ben's like, my long-term partner in this. He's like the other guy in uniform since the beginning. Um, and I had gotten busy with work. And we were kind of like, does anybody care? Should we even do this anymore? And we decided that like it kind of didn't matter whether or not anybody cared. Um, and if we were to break up, that we should go out on a high note. And the only way to go out on a high note for us is to like kind of create something that was like as substantial as we could possibly make it. And for me, that meant becoming willing to talk about the thing that I wanted to talk about the very least. So I kind of like, we've written about, you know, substance use issues from my past. We've written about religion, we've written about society, we've written about depression, like, anything else would be kind of treading old ground. And we didn't want to do that. So this was kind of, it it was time it was time for me to tackle something that I've just like never tackled before. I was like, if this is the note that we were going to go out on, then I want to go out as hard as we possibly can. And the rest of the band were behind me on that. Um, and that brought us to where we are now.
So now you stand in front of the people and you can say, yes, I suffered from bulimia. So do you feel better now that you've shed this burden of secrecy?
I don't know if better is the word. It's strange because it's become a lot more mechanical. The like this was something that I I never talked about to anyone. My wife knew and my family knew and bandmates who had been around me for a long time knew and old roommates knew. Like I can't hide it very well if you're around me a lot. Um, but it was never discussed. And now it's one of those like when you go through the mechanics of doing like of putting out a record and going through a record cycle um from beginning to end, like you write this music and then it becomes like kind of semantic. You're dealing with like, production numbers and you're dealing with like, press press figures that are coming up and you're dealing with uh you know um art and just like lots of like basic mundane shit. And like when you're talking about like all of these like you know basic items in terms of like just kind of like raw data, it really demystified the whole thing. And so by the time the record came out, like I had just gotten used to talking about it in really kind of clinical terms. Um, and that's kind of where it's stayed. I wouldn't necessarily say that I feel better, but I feel detached. I feel kind of like almost like cold to it. It's just very matter of fact.
And before the release of the new album, you released a big statement in on your Facebook page explaining the whole idea behind American standards. So, were you afraid that people will misunderstood you?
No. I was afraid that if people would misunderstand if I didn't do that. Um, it's one of those things where um, it's a concept album and a lot of it is worn on its sleeve. However, there's, still a lot of kind of like allegory buried in there. And I I think a big part of me put it out because I was concerned of being misunderstood. And so I felt it to be important to kind of address everything on like a micro level and just be as clear as possible with our intentions on the record, um, with the mechanics of making the record. And also, there is an element of the only negative reaction that we got from this was people like very few people saying that like I was like apologizing for creating art, and I don't find that to be the case at all. There is inherently uh a degree of fat phobia uh, in eating disorders, or in my kind of eating disorder, at least, and eating disorders like in similar families, i.e., like, anorexia. And I wanted to be clear that this record wasn't about so much like a fear of being fat as like something that is a flaw in other human beings, but that it is a mental illness that I suffer from. And at the end of the day, like it's like yes, this that like it takes a physical toll. um the But it is a mental illness, and there are multiple prongs to that. But yeah, I think the only time I was ever really kind of misunderstood throughout any of this was by putting that up there, and people say, and like, very few people saying like I was apologizing for creating something. And I'm like, well, this is part of what I've created. Like explaining this, writing this is part of the overarching piece itself. Like it's part of it. Like this is not me apologizing for my art. This is just my art.
And we usually associate bulimia with girls who have been poisoned by the standard of beauty shown in television. It is very rare to talk about men suffers from bulimia. So, what caused you to fall into the spiral of eating, vomiting?
I don't know. And that's something that I'm, currently working out with therapists and with like, other men who are like who suffer from, similar similar issues where I think for me, um, a lot of it, I was a heavy set kid, and I got teased for it a lot by other kids. Um, and by the time I hit my kind of like growth spurt and lost my baby fat, it was just set in my head. You know, I was like a rail thin teenager and rail thin through my 20s. Um, but I looked in the mirror and I just saw I saw a distortion of myself. Um, I think a lot of it has to do with control. Um, there were um, factors within my family life at a very young age that felt chaotic, and this was something that I had a degree of autonomy in and a good degree of control over. Obviously, like, I lost control. Um, and I've never been able to like really, get control again. But it is very much about, I think that it has more to do with how I mean, it has everything to do with my insecurities. And it has everything to do with a fear of how people see me. Um, but it's also like this kind of like playing chicken where like, I can, you know, eat a pint of ice cream and I can beat that pint of ice cream, you know, um, by regurgitating it. But then there's this other end to it where, and this kind of falls into like substance use stuff. I have a really hard time feeling anything other, like coping with feeling anything other than euphoria. I can deal with either euphoria or nothing at all, like a blank space. Um, so when I'm feeling bad, and I like, let's say like I reach for food, um, it it turns into overeating because I enjoy the way the food tastes. I can escape into food. I can, um, you know, I can tune out the rest of the world and just like, it's just me and the cookies that I'm eating, right? And then I do it too much and then I get sick, or I feel guilty or afraid and I make myself sick, Um, so it it comes from like every angle, and I'll probably be dissecting it for the rest of my life.
And over the years, we have learned to talk about depression, alcoholism, obesity, but bulimia is still this taboo topic. Why do you think that is?
I mean, I think that, you know, uh, I think people talk about it more now. I do see it as like come up in conversation more. Um, I think people are like, men in particular are afraid of, seeming weak. We are taught early on that you know, it is a feminine disease. Um, and that makes us, like kind of like recoil because at least for me, it challenges my masculinity. And and that in and of itself is terrifying. Um, Also, I think people generally don't like talking about vomit. Like, it's not pretty. It doesn't feel good. It smells bad. It vomit is immediately equated to all all a, a multitude of sicknesses, whether it be self-induced or whether it be having the flu or whether it be having cancer, you know, vomit is bad and people would rather not look at that.
And at the very beginning, I was thinking that American Standard, the title of the album, means the ideal image of woman or man shown in TV, but it turns out that it's more personal, more darker for you. Can you explain us the title?
I mean, it's like, at least in the States, it's a rather ubiquitous brand of toilet, you know. So you like if you look at your toilets or your like, the lid to your toilet, you will often see this like, you know, this like script scroll that says like, American Standard. And like it can be interpreted as like, beauty standards, Western beauty standards. It can be interpreted as like, the Western songbook. But, the literal the only thing that I was thinking was of the toilet, The thing is like, when you put a record out or you put any art into the world, like it immediately, kind of isn't yours anymore. So like if people take something else from it, then, that's fine. But the very literal meaning is it's a fucking toilet.
And why such a photo for the cover out for the American Standard? Because from a concept album, I would expect something more unpleasant, more organic.
Well, it has to do with subtle deterioration. We wanted scenes of kind of pollution or of neglect um, in a landscape. And we wanted that to mirror like the subtle deterioration of myself or of, anyone else who is kind of going through this. These these places that are overgrown or littered or have just fallen into disrepair, mirrors a lot of, my internal relationship with myself. Um, it also kind of mirrors a lot of what goes on in my body, over the years. Like, I have ulcers, I have, other health issues that are compounded by, you know, by my mental illness. Um, so we wanted it to speak to that, and we are also just, our friends Joshua Zucker Pluta and Sean Stout, who did the photography for the record and also directed the video for Permanent Embrace. We just truly love and respect their work, and we've we wanted to bring a concept to them and see what they could do with it. And this is what happened.
And in the creation of the plot for American Standard, you were helped by two people, and the first one was Beer Yeager. So, how did you meet, and what is the story of the negative space? Because unfortunately, it is not available in Poland.
Oh, well, I I've liked his I'm a sucker for like independent horror. I get a lot. I read a lot, and I get a lot out of independent horror books. And I've been a fan of his for a while. And one day I just like followed him on Twitter, and he messaged me saying that he liked our band, and we just started talking. And it was very much the same thing with Maggie Siebert, who also helped with the lyrics. I was just a fan of her work, and the way that B.R. Yeager writes is he takes a very stark look at the internal. He writes about depression and the roots of depression, and how that leads to external chaos, kind of like nobody else that I've ever really encountered. And with Maggie Siebert, it's almost the inverse, where she writes like body horror. So she writes about the external, um, but she writes about the she writes in very vivid, no uncertain terms about the internal damage that then um, peters out into, you know, self-harm and body dysmorphia.
And the best way to start an album that is supposed to be like unpleasant, very hard to digest, is to start with a song with 21 minutes long, so without any cuts. So did you think about dividing it into individual parts, or would it somehow dilute the message?
Well, it's funny. So how we went about making this record was like we recorded most of the instruments um, about a year ahead of time, and then I personally like sat on it for a year um we played shows and we'd see how the songs could work in a live setting, um where edits should go, how everything should fit. And the song American Standard was originally three separate songs. The three sections were um were intended to be three like distinct entities. And we didn't really know how to resolve any of them, eh, in a way that I found to be, compelling. And so after, toying with this for like a year, Ben and I sat down to and like just edited the three together, um, and made it work so that like the first track is this narrative arch where it is, you know, the first part is like is an internal dialogue, like, based around like acute self-hatred. Um, and then it goes into a section where it is the disease talking about like talking about controlling the host, like a parasite to host relationship. And then the end is like a moment of clarity where I realize what I'm doing, yet I'm helpless to stop, but I start taking inventory of the things in my life that brought me to this place, like the moments that I felt helpless early on as a child, um, that led me to that planted these seeds, that like led me down a self-destructive path.
And where did the idea for this military drill at the very beginning came from?
That was all Ben. Ben was like, I want to do this, this kind of a cappella, vocal only, um, track, or well, he wanted it to be a full track, but it wound up just being a section. Um, and it's just like, we'd never done anything where it was just really like naked vocals. And so we figured to not only just do naked vocals, but do naked vocals as hard as we possibly could. So yeah, that all that credit goes to Ben.
And the album was promoted by two singles, This Is Not a Prayer and Permanent Embrace. So, why the choice of these two songs? Was it because, well, they are the shortest on the album?
That's definitely a big part of it. The label wanted Permanent Embrace to be the lead single, but I felt strongly that like Permanent Embrace makes sense in the album as like as a closing piece because it is about how, you know, about how this disease leads to, leads to affecting other people. It's about taking like emotional hostages. Um, and if you are familiar with the record, it makes sense in a narrative arc, but it doesn't actually like get to like it doesn't talk about like the specifics of the disease itself. And so we went for This Is Not a Prayer because it directly directly addressed eating disorders in no uncertain terms. We didn't want there to be any ambiguity.
And the album is difficult, is heavy, is sometimes unpleasant, but in some places there are some nice, pleasant sounds, some melodies. So there were sparks of hope in the fight of against this disease.
Mhm. Yes, very much so. We wanted not for there to be hope's not the word that I would use, but we wanted there to be like, subtle kind of like moments of, kind of warped beauty. Because, you know, in this, like, it's not all hideous, being sick, there are moments of like kind of like warped lucidity that you don't necessarily see everything clearly, but like you think that you're on the right track, and you can think that that is beautiful. And so to have that going, like coinciding with all of the rather like hideous and chaotic moments, we felt um, we felt that it was like a necessary counterbalance.
And American Standard have a companion release called Nightmare City. So where did you get the idea for such for such a such an album or such a remix instrumental? Because there was something called Ghost House in the Nightmare City with an early version of Clemency before the American Standard.
Mhm. So Nightmare City is essentially it is the same thing as American Standard. Um, what happened is there's a lot of like synthetic elements on the record. There's a lot of, you know, varying synths. There's a lot of like glockenspiel. There's all kinds of crazy shit that's like buried underneath all of like, the guitars and drums and bass and vocals, like, the traditional like kind of like rock band. So we wanted to highlight that and make sure that it wasn't just buried. Um, and we did that by stripping away all of the like traditional band elements and just letting the synths exist and kind of do their thing, letting the noise do its thing. And when it came to the Ghost House thing, that is a re-recording of a song that we wrote and put out in like 2016, that we just wanted to revisit. We recorded that as a two-piece originally, and we wanted to see what it would go like, what how it would go as a full band. And we like this version a lot better.
And it's a funny coincidence because we were supposed to do this interview a few months ago, but you went on the American tour. And the very next interview I did was with Tangerine Dream. And among the inspirations for Nightmare City appears Tangerine Dream. So which of their works you like the most?
Oh God. I would say the Thief soundtrack is probably my favorite. Um, uh, as far as like standalone records, it's Force Majeure, but I really I really love their soundtrack work. I'd say the Thief soundtrack, the Sorcerer soundtrack, Um, you know, what else?
I love The Keep, but the movie was crappy, but the soundtrack was amazing.
The the Keep soundtrack's fantastic. The movie's beautiful, but yeah, it's not. It's very disjointed. Um, I really love the Miracle Mile soundtrack. I love the Firestarter soundtrack. There's a lot, you know. Yeah.
And Nightmare City in its physical version appeared on the cassette. So what about the CD version? Will be there one?
Maybe later. Yeah, yeah, I'm not sure. That's kind of up to Sacred Bones.
And there are also concepts behind Uniform to promote the latest release. And you have also appeared in Poland, in Poznań. It wasn't your
Yes.
first visit to land countries, but was it a successful one?
Oh yeah, yeah. The shows in Poland were great. We were with A Place to Bury Strangers, who are old friends of ours from here, and uh, uh, um, oh my goodness, and Stella Rose. Please, don't. Sorry about that gap. But yeah, Stella Rose, who is also from here and who's a phenomenal performer, and yeah, the crowds were super receptive, and you know we had great gigs. The energy felt fantastic. I truly love Poland. Yeah.
And what are the nearest future plans for Uniform?
Well, we're gonna go on tour with Pharmacon in the States on the East Coast in the beginning of December. Um, and that's it for the year. We might play some festivals in Europe in late spring, early summer, but that has yet to, formally materialize. So we're just waiting to see. We've had a very busy fall, and it's been very nice. So, it's just, we're playing the hurry up and wait game to see what comes next.
And this is all that I have prepared. So thank you for your time. And at the end, you can say something to our readers, maybe invite them to the Uniform world or encourage them to check out the new release.
Um, Thank you so much for your time. There are billions of things that you could be doing other than reading the garbage that I have to say, and I appreciate that that you took the time out of your day to hear my thoughts. And I appreciate you, Tomek, for giving me the space. And Yeah, if you are so inclined, give us a listen. Um, if not, then that's fine too. But I'm grateful that you've traveled with me this far.
Okay, so again, thank you for your time. Have a good day. I'm going
Thank you. You
to
too.
bed. So
Get some rest. Get some rest. Yeah, we've spoken before. You did the gigs in Poland, right?
no, no, no.
Okay. For some reason I thought we had talked before, um but it's lovely meeting you.
Likewise. So again,
Yes.
have a good day. And
Same. All right.
I have your email, so I'm gonna need some photos for the interview. So we will be in contact.
Fantastic. I appreciate it.
Okay, bye.
All right. Sounds good. Take care. Bye.